You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, talking about a lot of basketball. Seasons have come to an end, or at least regular seasons. Big 12 and Mountain West tournaments are starting up here very soon, actually. And then we'll be talking about the Mammoth, my thoughts on the trade deadline. Should they have done more? Did they do enough? The deadline as a whole across the league. And then I'll also talk about Real Salt Lake. How about Real Salt Lake scoring goals? Talk about them later on in the episode. But first, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you could do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, rate 5 stars, however you listen, wherever you listen. Helps me out a ton. You guys know this. And if you could just also share this show with one person that you think might enjoy it, mean the world to me. And you could find me on Facebook and Instagram, the Matt Cave Podcast. You can find me on YouTube, as well as wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am now officially everywhere. So that is very exciting for me. From Spotify to Pandora, I Love Radio, stuff like that, I'm on them. So thank you all for everything you've done, and let's dive into things. Let's start with the Utah Jazz. They, after a blip in the radar, beating the Washington Wizards, that kind of helped to ruin their top overall pick chances that are non-existent. I'm warning you all now that the NBA is not going to allow the Jazz to pick in the top 5 if they can help it. They're not going to allow it. The Jazz are their scapegoat for tanking right now. When you look at the Sacramento Kings, Indiana Pacers, Brooklyn Nets, Washington Wizards, New Orleans, Dallas, and Memphis, each and every one of those teams is tanking. Each and every single one of them. Yet it's the Jazz and the Pacers that paid the price. And the Nets, the Wizards, the Kings kind of did the Looney Tunes, wiping sweat off their brow. Saying, woo, at least it wasn't us. So I'll tell you all right now, it's not even a conspiracy theory. It is probably something that is going to happen as a line in the sand, flag in the ground. You tank. You say you're tanking. We are going to punish you however we can. It's not a true lottery. It never has been. So there's my warning to you all. But at least this time when it happens, everybody will see that the mask is off and that there's no such thing as a lottery. But the Jazz lose to the Milwaukee Bucks on the road by 18, 117-99. Cody Williams, I guess, he had a double-double, but I still think he's a bust. That was a missed draft pick. The amount of time it would take for him to develop into let's call it a serviceable backup in the NBA, that runway doesn't exist anymore in the modern league. It just doesn't exist anymore. Early on in the 2000s, in the 90s, even in the 80s, there would be runway. You could stash him on the bench for a while. You could develop him. He could play more and more. But when you are a lottery pick in today's NBA, if you don't pan out in 1 to 2 years, you're a bust. And that's what Cody Williams is. So he was the one that the Jazz kind of pointed out on their social media as like the player of the game or whatever. That's really sad if that's the case. Looking at the rest of the squad, it should be a better team. They really should be. They're not deep, to be certain. If you have Kyle Filipowski playing starter minutes, then you obviously have people that are injured or are being held out for tanking reasons, like Lauri Markkanen or Walker Kessler, who's been out because of surgery to repair his shoulder. So when we look at this roster, if it were completely healthy, I think this team would be battling for a play-in spot. Fully healthy, pedal to the floor, battling for a play-in spot. I absolutely 100% believe that. I think this team fully healthy is better than Portland, the Clippers, the Suns, the Grizzlies, but they're just not healthy and the front office doesn't want to win. So they're mired in this tank off with Indiana, Brooklyn, the teams I named earlier. I don't need to mention them again. But the teams that didn't get punished. It's just Utah is the scapegoat because of Sam Presti of Oklahoma City, the GM there, Bobby Marks and his vendetta against Danny Ainge because Danny Ainge hoodwinked him into taking on Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and all of that mess when the Nets first moved to Brooklyn. So I'm sure there's a little bit there. Bobby Marks never made it as a full GM, so a little bit more against Danny Ainge, I guess, because he was in the decision that brought those guys to Brooklyn for that massive package that netted Boston their current competitive window of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, etc. So I'm sure there's a little bit extra in there for him to kind of whine and complain about the Jazz. But the Jazz currently sit, as we look at the standings, 5th worst in the league. They are 3 games, I guess, worse, if we're looking at it in that lens, than the Wizards and Nets. The Wizards and Nets are 16-46 and 16-47, respectively. The Jazz are 19-45. There's going to be multiple teams that only win games in the teens. Tell me how it's just the Jazz. If it was just the Jazz, they would be the only ones in the teens. Sacramento is not even going to sniff 20 wins this year. So, how is it to the Jazz? Answer me that. Riddle me that. All right. I've talked enough about the Jazz here. More than I probably should have. It's more about anger against the NBA and ESPN, but here we are. So the Jazz are doing Jazz things, losing because, well, they can't do otherwise. The Utes wrapped up their regular season against Baylor, losing 101-75. The year overall is a forgetful season, except for one thing. Alex Jensen is creating a culture for Utah. The talent isn't there, but the team does fight. And the scores don't really reflect that, right? I mean, home finale against Colorado, lost by 14. They lost against Arizona State by 13. When I look at these scores, it's more like lack of talent, lack of depth. And that's a funny thing to say in today's college basketball world because no team truly has depth. But it's just a lack of talent, really. They have like one guy on the roster, Terrence Brown, who is Big 12 caliber. And I think Alex Jensen is doing a good job. Is it a great job? That's to be determined. It's the first year trying to build a program from scratch. Lest we forget, Kevin Young came into a rather good situation at BYU, left by Mark Pope. Mark Pope had the team on a very good trajectory. And Kevin Young kind of just put rocket fuel on the fire, and that's where BYU is now. They got another 5-star recruit signed on for next season. You can say a lot about Kevin Young. He's a fantastic recruiter. But this is about Utah. Alex Jensen is building something. It's going to take a while. We'll see if the athletic department for the University of Utah has the patience to let him build. Because I believe he can do something there. I really do. He got Terrence Brown. Terrence Brown could be a second-team or third-team All-Big 12 performer. So, yes, Utah won only 10 games this season. Yes, Utah only won 2 games in the Big 12. But what I saw in a lot of these games was they didn't quit. And that's different from years past for the Utes. It was a rough year, but things will start looking up. I'm very interested to see how Alex Jensen does in the transfer portal. I'm very interested to see. Utah plays against Cincinnati to tip off the Big 12 tournament on Tuesday, March 10th. I don't expect them to win that, but if they do, maybe they could go on a miracle run. There's always hope, right? There's always that 1% or negative percent chance that something can happen. All right, let's move on to Utah State. Man, I really need to keep my mouth shut, huh? They got blown out. I warned everybody, too. So I get to put a feather in my cap here. I warned everybody about that trip to UNLV. And they got blown out by 27, 92-65. And then they came home and they did win. They beat New Mexico and they sealed the Mountain West crown. So they are the Mountain West regular season champs. They are awaiting to see who they play in the second round of the Mountain West Conference Tournament. That will be played on March 12th, which is a Thursday, if math is mathing correctly. But I never know. You never trust me when it comes to mathing. So Utah State is a very good team. They got tested down the stretch, which will only help them when it comes tournament time. And I'm impressed. MJ Collins is the real deal. Mason Falslev, he has really good shot selection. He averages 16 points a game and 52% shooting from the field. Are you kidding me? So, yes, this team could make a lot of noise come the big dance. They really could. And it'll be interesting to see where they get placed by the selection committee, because Utah State has been good all year. They did have two-game losing streaks. Other than that, they've put together a really good resume, and they've had a really good season. So Utah State wraps up the season 25-6. We'll see if they can hang on to their head coach. I don't think so. There's a lot of Power 4 openings across the country. Georgia Tech just opened up. That's a very attractive spot because it's in Atlanta, and it looks like that university wants to open up the war chest to get better in both football and basketball. So it'll be interesting to see how the coaching carousel spins for Utah State, but if the past few years have shown us anything, it almost doesn't matter who the head coach is for Utah State basketball. They just win. And it'll also be interesting to see what happens when they get into Pac-12 play next year and they face off against bigger team like Gonzaga. That'll be very interesting to see where Utah State stands when it comes to Gonzaga, because Gonzaga has been the whale in the small pond. Now, Gonzaga is stepping up their competition a little bit to where they don't only have to play BYU and St. Mary's every year. It's going to be more teams. San Diego State, Utah State. I would even throw in Washington State or even Oregon State in there. So we'll see what happens, but this year they won the regular season crown. We'll see if they can do the double and get the tournament crown as well. But a great season by Utah State. They had the best season of any basketball team in the state of Utah. Any way you slice it, they did. And lastly, BYU. Rough year. I've said my piece about it. I'm not going to hammer home anything other than they showed up and they fought hard in this home finale. Rob Wright and AJ DeBonsa were not going out on a loss. They just weren't. And they showed up and showed out against Texas Tech. Yes, Texas Tech was without their best player, but BYU was without Richie Saunders and about 98% of their roster. It was a fun game. Marriott Center was loud as always, almost too loud at times. You could barely hear the whistle. But AJ DeBonsa played 40 minutes. Rob Wright played 36. They combined for 48 points. I mean, I could go on and on about like field goal percentage, free throw percentage, personal fouls, all this other stuff, but I'm just proud of them. I am. They fought through. They beat a top 10 team in Texas Tech. They showed that they are still dangerous come tournament time. And what was even better was Richie Saunders was on the bench for this one. He wasn't suited up or anything, but he was there rooting on his team. He could, and he would have every right to just pack it up and get ready for the NBA draft. He really could. But instead, he's spending the time with his team. So just kudos overall to this team. They fought, they battled, and they won against a top 10 team to wrap up the season. That punched their ticket for March Madness. They're going to the big dance regardless of what happens in the Big 12 tournament. I was starting to lean towards BYU needing to win at least 2 or 3 games in the Big 12 tournament to get a 100% ticket punched. But with the combined weight of them beating Texas Tech here to end the season, having AJ DeBonsa and Rob Wright, you're not going to want to keep those guys out of the big dance. And then just having as many Big 12 teams in the big dance as possible. So realistically, the Big 12 could have, 8 teams in the big dance. Arizona, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, Texas Tech, TCU, BYU, and Central Florida all have a realistic shot of making March Madness. That's exciting. That would also mean they are the best basketball conference in the country, but all of us here already knew that. That's not breaking news. AJ DeBonsa is a very smart kid, too, by the way. I don't know if anyone else saw this, but in a recent interview, he said he's not sure if he's going to go pro after this season. He's going to have to talk to his mom because his mom wants him to get a degree. That's really smart. He's not coming back. He's not. He's going to go pro. He's a top 3 pick. He's a top 3 pick. If I were him, though, I wouldn't hire an agent, just in case. Maybe those top 3 teams, you don't want to play for him. That is a really good thing that he has in his back pocket. Because of the recruiting class coming in for BYU, he could say, you know what? I don't like those teams. I don't want to play for those teams. I'm going to stay in school. Am I saying this is going to happen? Absolutely not. But it is an option for him. So, looking forward for BYU, they start the Big 12 tournament against Kansas State, who finished just above Utah. So, by all measures, BYU should win that game. And then they'll move on into the tournament to face off against a team they'll probably lose against. Just because it's not because of the lack of talent from those 2 guys. And it's not because of a lack of drive or want. It's just you can't take them off the floor, and so they're going to get tired. And it is a tournament, so it's going to be every other day you're going to be playing games. If BYU were more healthy, this could have been a really special season, but it didn't happen. And that's when you have to look at your strength and conditioning team, nutrition team, all that stuff. But I just want to say I'm proud of the team. They battled hard. They were down at the half against the Red Raiders. They fought back, and they won the game. Thanks to AJ DeBonsa and Rob Wright. All right, let's move it on along here to the Mammoth. Let's talk first about this road trip they've been on. They are 3 for 3, and they play 5 road games here. This is the last long road trip Utah has for the rest of the season. Otherwise, it's like 1 game out and then a couple of home games, or 2 games out and then a couple of home games. So the majority of the games for the rest of the season for Utah are at the Delta Center. And this season, the Mammoth are very good at home. They are 18-10-2 at home. They have the same amount of wins at home as Dallas and Minnesota. They have more at home than Vegas or Montreal. So this team is a very good team at home. And they're proving that they can win in hostile environments. That environment in Ohio against the Blue Jackets was a playoff environment as far as I'm concerned. That was crazy. And that game, if you were not able to watch it, I feel bad for you a little bit, because that game had everything. It literally had everything. It had fast break goals. It had fights. It had a 5-on-5 fight in the third period. It had goalies pushing people. It had tripping. It had great skill expressions from both teams. And it had overtime. I mean, what more do you want in a hockey game? I don't know. It had bad officiating too. So it literally had everything. That game was so much fun, and I would say the same thing if Utah lost. Heading into the third period, I was thinking, you know what? I'm really happy with just 1 point from this game. Heading into overtime, I was thinking the same thing. I'm happy with this 1 point, but they got 2. So to wrap up the road trip, they have Chicago on Monday, and then they have Minnesota on a back-to-back on Tuesday. So they need to win that game against Chicago, and then whatever happens in Minnesota happens. But this team's awesome. I really like it. Now let's talk about the deadline. Yes, I do think they should have done more. I think they should have opened the war chest for Robert Thomas. I really do. That is the kind of player that you do pony up for. And Bill Armstrong knows it. He's the guy who drafted him. So when you're looking at your team and you're looking about how close you are, obviously they don't know, right? They don't know exactly how close they are to real contention because they haven't made the playoffs yet, and they don't know what they need to get over the hump to get to the next round. So I understand the calculus there. Go with what you got, and they didn't really give up all that much to get Mackenzie Weegar. They gave up 3 second-round picks, Oli Mata and Jonathan Castagna, who is having a wonderful season for Cornell, but is projected to be a bottom 6 forward, and Utah really does not need any more of that kind of guy. So they moved that package for Mackenzie Weegar, who looked fantastic in his first game with the team. And to even further the legend of Mackenzie Weegar, he got with the team flying across the country after dealing with visa issues He never had a chance to practice with the team or have a morning skate. He got to the team a couple of hours before puck drop. So he had just enough time to introduce himself, get dressed, and get on the ice. And he played the game that he did. He's a very good fit, a very savvy trade from Bill Armstrong. I don't want to say taking advantage of a team that's going into a rebuild, but leveraging that position very well. He did give up 3 second-round picks. That is a hefty amount for a 32-year-old defenseman. But the 32-year-old defenseman has 3 more years left on his contract. So it's not a rental. And that's exactly what Bill Armstrong said he didn't want to do at this deadline. He didn't want to do rentals because Utah's not that close yet. I respect that. But when you have a player that is being dangled out there like Robert Thomas, and the prospect that the Blues were reportedly asking for was Caleb Desnoyers, the scouting reports that I've seen for Caleb Desnoyers is that his ceiling is a little bit higher than Robert Thomas, but he's essentially Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas is 26. He signed on a very cap-friendly deal as we go into this new increasing salary cap over the next couple of seasons. I say you go for it. Bird in the hand and all of that. I think that would have sent shockwaves through the NHL, really, honestly, announcing that Utah is there and they want to get these pieces together now and go for it. They don't need any more first-round picks. They don't need any more depth in their pipeline. They're ready to go. That's what this trade would have announced. Instead, they get a very good addition in Mackenzie Weegar. They shore up the blue line. The new pairing, I'm very excited to see how it works out between Sergachev and Weegar, if that's what they go with. With the performance of Durzi and Weegar, I think what Mackenzie Weegar has shown is that he can play with any defenseman. He was even out there on the ice with John Marino and Nate Schmidt and Ian Cole. He was out there with everybody except for Nick DeSimone, I think. So it was a solid trade deadline from Bill Armstrong. It could have been out of this world good if he wanted to pony up the assets to get Robert Thomas. Another guy who could be a captain for your team. A guy that Bill Armstrong knows. So it's disappointing, to be sure, because you know that the Mammoth could have gotten somebody that is fantastic. But that can always happen in the offseason, right? There's going to be new GMs in Nashville as well as in St. Louis, 2 divisional rivals. Nobody knows the direction those franchises are going to go in. Personally, I think they're both going to tear it down and start over because throughout sports, doesn't matter the sport, when a new general manager hits a team, 9 times out of 10, he wants to put his stamp on the roster. And most of the time, those general managers want to start from the ground up. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen with these 2 franchises. We'll see. The Predators have had a very weird season. Some games they look like they could be a playoff team, and then other games they just get blown out. And it's almost on a night-to-night basis with them, which is very odd to say because they are a veteran-laden team. But when it comes to the Blues, they are pretty far out of it. And for the most part, they have been healthy this season. It's just they haven't been scoring goals, and Jordan Binnington is having a career worst year. So do you tear that down if you're St. Louis? I think you do. They already started a little bit, trading their captain, Braden Shen, trading their associate captain in Justin Falk. So do you continue that this offseason? And can Utah kind of jump in there and be like, hey, we got the prospects, we got the draft picks. Talk to us first. Maybe that's going to happen. Overall, though, according to Stathletes, which is a website that places like The Athletic, which is the New York Times, and ESPN, which, take with a grain of salt, ESPN is garbage now, they have Utah as over 90% chance to make the playoffs this year. That's really awesome, but I'm going to not bank on that. If I were a betting man, I would put if I had the money, I would put like $50 on Utah not making the playoffs. I would. Just because the teams lurking behind Utah are still very good when we look at the wild card standings. Right now, they are in the catbird seat of the wild card. They're not going to catch Minnesota, Dallas, or Colorado. They're just not. In fact, Colorado could hit 100 points by the end of next week. So, looking at the standings, Utah has 72 points. The other teams that are fighting for a wild card come mainly from the Pacific Division, which is the worst division in hockey at the moment. Sorry, Knights fans, but it's just true. And just watch your own team. Like, can they get a lead in the first period? I don't know if they can this year. Anywho, looking at the standings here. So let's take Anaheim and Vegas out of the equation. Anaheim has 73 points. Vegas has 72. I hope Vegas can win the Pacific, because if they do, it would be Utah versus Vegas, and that would be a killer playoff series. It would be so much fun. Anyway, Seattle has 67 points. Edmonton has 68, and they're trending in the wrong direction. San Jose has 66. Those are the immediate threats. Then you have the Kings and the Predators sitting at 64 points, and Winnipeg at 62. And Winnipeg is 5-2-3 in their last 10. So keep an eye out there. The reason why I'm not sold on Utah making the playoffs is because of the collapse that happened last year. It did happen, and it's largely the same roster and exactly the same coaching staff. So while I'm very excited, if I had the money, I would not be buying my playoff tickets yet. I would just be enjoying the ride. And that's what I'm going to be doing as I watch these games. So while it's very close, it's not there yet. They have not clinched anything, but they're tantalizingly close. I'll put it that way. All right, let's move it on to Real Salt Lake here. Guess what? Real Salt Lake won again. They only have a +1 goal differential because the 2 games they've won, they've only won by 1 goal. But they beat Atlanta in Atlanta. That does not mean what it used to mean, however. Atlanta used to be the Inter Miami of the MLS. They used to be that flagship team or club. And now they've kind of fallen apart. Not even kind of. They have fallen apart. So Atlanta's not a very good team anymore, but Real Salt Lake won. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to beat the teams that you're better than. And they did it on the road. So 3-2 is the final score. And what's even more encouraging about this final score is that the goals were not scored by Diego Luna. In fact, Diego Luna still has yet to suit up for the Claret and Cobalt this season. That's encouraging. Not necessarily for Diego Luna's chances to make the U.S. men's national team come the World Cup, but it's encouraging because the team is not going to rely on that superstar player to carry them. When he comes back, he will just increase what Real Salt Lake is doing. And it's the same thing that I've told you about how Pablo Mastroeni likes to have his system. He likes to flip the field. And what I mean by that is he likes to have his, let's say his right back, spot either a left midfielder or a left wing attacker on the opposite corner of the field and launch the ball in that direction into space for his guy to run onto. That is what Pablo Mastroeni likes to have happen. And so when Real Salt Lake is at their best, they are flipping the field constantly and wearing out the opposing team's back four. For surprising them, which is what happened against Atlanta. Set pieces are still a bugaboo for Real Salt Lake. That's going to happen with a young team with a bunch of new additions, which Real Salt Lake has. And so that's definitely something to look forward to. But overall, this team, dare I say, looking kind of good and a little fun to watch because you know they can't hang on to a lead. So it's really fun. Overall, I'm excited for when Diego Luna comes back to see how the team plays with their best player back in the fold. But overall, better start to the season than I was expecting. They are 2-0-1, +1 goal differential. So not the bottom of the league by any stretch of the imagination, which is where I thought they would be. All right, that's the show this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave. By the way, overall grade for GM Bill Armstrong for the trade deadline, I would put that at around a B+.